Hey, it's Stefan. In this video, we're going to be using scanning apps to document your work so it looks less like the image on the left and more like the image on the right. First, we need to make sure that our image looks good. If your image is on a piece of trace, you should use a backing like Bristol or something similar. If your paper isn't a perfect rectangle, I would recommend also putting a backing on it, and you'll see why soon. Once you have your image, you need to decide where you're going to take the photo. You can take your photo indoors, but indoor conditions typically have bad lighting, which leads to inconsistent line weights in your final scan. You can also take your photo outdoor in the shade, which has better lighting but poor contrast. You can also take your photos outdoor in the direct sunlight. This will generally give you better lighting and a much higher contrast. Keep in mind that different types of scans will require different lighting conditions, so play around with all three and see which one suits your image the best. Next, we need a scanning app. The two that I primarily use are Adobe Scan and Evernote Scannable. In this tutorial, we are primarily going to use Evernote Scannable. These two apps and pretty much every single app that you're going to find on the App Store will function basically the same, so it doesn't really matter which one you pick. But some professors might have preferences, and you might have a preference. So I would download a few, see which one you like, and delete the ones that you don't. Once you open Scannable, all you have to do is point your camera at your drawing, and Scannable will automatically take the photo and save your scan. Next, all you have to do is tap the scan at the bottom. And if you tap that circle in the bottom right corner of your image, you'll get various options that you can use to modify the scan that you just took. Typically, the only tool that you're going to use out of these is crop, and you'll get this GUI layout, and all you have to do is tap your finger on one of these points and drag it to the corner of your image. Keep in mind that the app is going to try to force the image into a rectangle, so if your image is skewed, that skew will show up, which is why you want to have your images on a rectangular background. Also, when you're cropping your image, in order to get it really perfect, you'll notice that when you drag the corner of your frame, you'll see this little circle appear. But in Scannable, it seems like mine wasn't working. If technical glitches like this happen, I usually just switch apps. You can see the feature working perfectly fine in Adobe Scan. You should play around with the other settings that you have at your disposal, but if your initial photo was in a good setting with good quality light, you shouldn't really need to use these that much. Next, you're going to send the photo to yourself. You can either save it on your phone and airdrop it to yourself, or send yourself an email. Any strategy works fine as long as you can ensure that the strategy does not drop the resolution of the image at all. Email works just fine for this. Here you can see I'm having technical difficulties with the mail feature, so I'm going to use the share feature instead. And I'll just select the application for my mail and send an email to myself this way. For the next step, we're going to be using InDesign to lay out our images. If you want your workspace to look more like mine, click Window, Workspace, and Book. Next, we're going to draw a frame. Type F on your keyboard or go over here and click the Frame tool and hold left click to draw your frame. Note that if you hold Shift, you're going to be snapping your frame such that it is forced into a square. After you draw your frame, type V or click here for the Select tool. Make sure your frame is selected, and then go to File, Place, or Control D to place an image or PDF. If you have multiple pages that you want to place, make sure that you click Show Import Options, and then click Open. Your scan will be populated within the frame that you just drew. However, the scan that you placed isn't at the correct scale, so we need to fix that. To do this, we need to select the image directly and not the frame that it sits within. To do this, we're going to type A on our keyboard or click over here on the Direct Select tool, and then click within your frame on the image, and you'll see this brown box appear. This means that we've selected our image directly. Then we can use the Scale tool by typing S or clicking here, and with our image selected, hold left click in order to scale up or down your image. Note that the location of the scaling isn't exactly where we want it to be. I think for this case, I'd prefer the scaling to happen relative to the center of the image. To change this, we're going to go to the top left corner of our workspace where we have this 3x3 grid, and we're going to click the center. This will make sure that whenever we scale anything, it scales relative to the center of whatever we've selected. In order to maintain the aspect ratio of the image, I'm going to hold Shift while holding left click and dragging to change the scale of my image. Let's double check to make sure that our scan looks okay. As we zoom in by holding Alt and using the scroll wheel up, we notice that the image is kind of blurry. And this is because InDesign isn't rendering the images at their highest quality. In order to change this, we can use Control-Alt-H, and this will update the images such that they are displayed in their highest resolution. Finally, to give our images that little extra touch, we're going to get rid of this blue tape and kind of shadow prints that are going around this image. And we're going to use Photoshop to do that. To open Photoshop, go ahead and direct select this image, right click on it, and then go to Edit With, and then Adobe Photoshop. And Adobe Photoshop will open the image that you had selected. This Photoshop portion is a little bit out of the scope of this video, but I'll still walk you through what my process might be to clean up an image like this. So to start, I'm going to create a copy of the image just in case I make a mistake, and I'll hide it. Then I'll create a new layer, and I'm going to put it underneath my copy. Next, I'm going to fill it such that the background is white. Then I'm going to reselect my top layer and create a clipping mask, and then within this clipping mask, I'm going to non-destructively remove all of the excess bits from the image that I don't want using the brush tool. Here you can kind of see why it's important to get a really good scan as opposed to try to do everything in post-production. There are a lot of shadow lines that are behind the lines of the actual sketch that are very difficult, if not impossible, to remove. So making sure that you have a scan without these difficult areas to remove is very important. Once I've finished all of that, I'm going to save my file. Back in InDesign, I'm going to directly select that image again, and I'm just going to use Control-D to place this new image right on top. The neat thing about the Adobe suite is that I can just put the Photoshop file directly into InDesign without having to export the Photoshop file as some sort of image file, and it will update such that it fits the same space as the file that we had before. Then I'm going to press W to change the display mode so that I can see what it might look like when we print this. And you can see that the image on the right looks much more clean than the image on the left. I hope this video was helpful in your scanning endeavors. Bye bye.